Jim posted a video about articles that used to be in newspapers celebrating people's lives, how obituaries would talk about where they had worked, what they had done in their lives, other than just being a list of family members that had survived them. While Jim was thinking about that, he thought about weeks, even months after his dad passed away. Dad was one of those kind of people that would talk to anybody. Jim watches the Progressive insurance commercials here in America, and it talks about people turning into their dad because they talk to the people in line in front of them. They put up a shopping cart. They tell the person that cut up their ham to the deli that they did a good job. And they're mocking those people. And, well, my dad was one of those people they would have mocked. Because Dad did always say something to a waitress, something to a server. He always had a good word to say to everyone he met. He would share a joke with you. He would ask how you were doing. And if you'd ever shared with him that someone was sick, he'd ask you how they were doing the next time he talked to you. He'd ask you about your kids, your wife, maybe your mom and dad. And he would just, in general, talk to anybody he met. It was very hard for Dad to meet a stranger, and very hard for Dad to meet somebody that he would completely be mad at. There were people that he couldn't stand, but it was rare. I know, and even as he got older, it seemed like he mellowed a little bit. We would talk about things as a family. And when I say family, I mean extended family. Nieces, nephews, his grandkids, and we would all be sitting around talking. And I remember one day we were discussing homosexuality and how people would work with people and how they would go to school with people and how younger generations were more accepting of things because people were more open. They met more people that were trans and different things like that. And one of my nephews shared how some man had offered to buy him a drink when he was in college at a bar. And my nephew simply said, well, I would accept the drink. He said, probably need to be upfront with you that, I'm heterosexual. Then, we were discussing things like that and people we knew. And it surprised us. We all heard a story Dad had never told us before. He was in the military in Alaska. And he was telling us about hitchhiking one time. Something you could do back in the 60s without as much fear, I guess, as you have nowadays. Dad said a fellow picked him up and said over the next block of traffic, fellow let Dad know what he was expecting for giving him a ride, and Dad said, well, just stop the next stoplight and I'll get out. So the guy didn't try to force him, didn't fight him or anything. And that's one of the things that I think people find the oddest about older generations. They know things about people, and they accept those things about people. Always kind of find it interesting when somebody says they told their parents, I was scared about coming out to them, or I was scared about telling them this or that. And their parents said, well, we're just finally glad you've accepted it for yourself and can share with the world. But anyway, a little bit of a tangent there. But no, what Jim found interesting is in Dad's older life, we had some friends, and they were a gay couple, and everybody knew it. And Mom and Dad would invite them over for supper, and they'd sit and we'd eat, and we'd talk. They'd go home, just like any other people would come by. And even by saying it like that, Jim realizes he's maybe making them seem odd. But a lot of people would see him as odd and maybe not be as accepting. I just found it interesting and exciting that Mom and Dad were so accepting of people like that. I know my dad, one time we were in a restaurant that we frequented, and there was somebody in the restaurant who was transitioning, and Dad took the opportunity to asked one of the other servers whether the person that was transitioning preferred to be called he or she or they, and it sort of surprised the other server, and they thanked Dad for asking that. And Dad said, well, I just don't want to misgender the person, and would rather be able to say yes sir or yes ma'am or thank you sir or whatever I need to say. Like I said, the other server was a little bit surprised that I guess someone of Dad's age would even worry about properly gendering someone or be concerned about making sure they didn't upset them or embarrass them. Dad would always share dad jokes with one of the tellers at the bank. One of the tellers at the bank told Dad one time when we went in to make a deposit. So then after that, Dad would always make sure he had one to share with him whenever we went in. Dad, like I said, always was a favorite of servers because Dad always made sure he left more of a tip than was expected, because Dad said he would look around the restaurant and there were other people that were leaving nothing for a tip, so he felt like he had to leave more than enough to make up for those people that weren't leaving anything. And yes, there were benefits to it. Our drinks never went empty. Our food was always brought to the table quickly. We were always asked, do we need anything else? But it was more than just a great service. Dad realized from my brother's time in the restaurant industry that waitresses live on about $2 an hour before their tips. So he realized the importance of that. Dad was one of those people that me and my brother would pre-bus the table, and once he asked us what we were doing and why we were doing, he would help us pre-bus a table. He also would help us turn a table as fast as we could. But if we were going to be sitting there drinking coffee for a while, he'd let the waitress know. He'd go ahead and tip her and say, we're going to be sitting here for a while talking, but I wanted to go ahead and give you that now. That way that waitress knew that that table wasn't just sitting there drinking coffee and eating pie and not being turned, so that she was missing out on an opportunity to make more tips for the night. And Dad, like I said, just never met a stranger. When Dad passed, my next trip to the barber, I know it's hard to believe, Jim does go to the barber shop every once in a while. Barber said he was sorry to hear, was sorry he didn't make it to the funeral. People at the bank, not only our local bank that we used, but other banks that we frequented for business purposes, all would ask where Dad was, why he wasn't in the car with me, and I'd let them know. And they always, hate to hear that. And it was a genuine hate to hear that, not just, oh, well, that's awful. But they, you could tell they were moved by their way they talked, the look on their face. There were waitresses, and some of them knew before we told them. Said, I saw your dad's picture in the paper. I saw his obituary in the paper, and sorry to hear about that. We always loved when he came in here. And so Dad was a memorable person. He wasn't famous or anything. I doubt his name was ever in the newspaper, other than maybe, like I said, one of those newspapers from the 60s where his small hometown might have mentioned the fact that he joined the Army or that he graduated basic training or something like that. But Dad was liked and respected. And I suppose, people say they don't speak ill of the dead. But I've never heard anyone had a bad thing to say about Dad after he passed. Nobody was ever openly aggressive and openly hateful when he was alive either. There were, one person in particular, but we won't go into that. But, so yeah, when I was thinking about how obituaries used to share people's life, made me think about my dad and his life.